Hey, this is John Chen with another engaging virtual meetings interview. So exciting, man. This day has really been an amazing uh, contrast, I guess is the best word, because I was in LA last week in that physical, real, world, and now I'm back into this virtual world. And today is really a true testament to what is the power of virtual, right? Well, it was amazing and had the full attention of the people who I was speaking with while I was in LA. Here in virtual, I've literally met probably 12 to 14 people today, and from all different locations, all different states, a few that were international. Got some emergency, quote unquote, or like high value work done that like things that need to happen now. And if you drive to that meeting, it takes an hour. And so I just sitting here in this desk and just impressed with the contrast of what are the advantages and maybe challenges of both the virtual world and the in-person world. Meaning, speaking of which, it doesn't matter which world that you're in. In fact, I think if you're in the virtual world, it's even more important to be organized and because there's so many other things, right? You may have seen my setup, right? I've got screens all over the place. We have data all over the place. We have multiple apps vying for your attention. And so I think that you need to stay highly organized if you want to stay very productive on virtual. And I feel the same way about in person. If you've ever seen my kitchen, I have had it professionally organized and it makes my heart sing to do that. And it's been that way more than 8 years, which is like a miracle for a lot of times when you organize that if you don't maintain it, it really turns into that. So I'm happy to really talk to our next guest who gave us this invoking or uh, provocative title that your current obsession, right? We got to stop meeting like this. Let's find out what that is. This person is a productivity consultant, trainer, helps busy professionals prioritize what matters. Let's welcome to our virtual stage here, the one and only Debbie Rosemont. Let's bring Debbie on. Hey, Debbie.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. All right. Well, Debbie, why don't you go ahead and open with a great easy question here, which is tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for my friends who don't know you.
Yeah, so thanks for asking. I am Debbie Rosemont, and I help busy professionals who are overwhelmed by all that they have to do, but also all that they want to do. I help them figure out what their priorities truly are and commit to those priorities, plan their time so that those priorities are first and foremost. And that includes eliminating time wasters. And then I help them be more productive to produce those desired results with greater ease so that they end up with more time, energy, and attention for what really matters to them.
Okay, well, I got to jump to this title. Like, I get all of my guests here to give me now
Yeah.
a provocative title. I'm looking at this one, which is we got to stop meeting like this, right? so, so what are you seeing now here in 2022 from your seat about what are virtual meetings and what do you want to see stopped in virtual meetings?
Uh, well, and I think this title, I mean, when I picked it, it's really a play off of what I call a workshop or a training or a consulting theme that I use sometimes when I'm helping people figure out how to have more efficient and effective meetings in general. So both in person or virtual. But the one of the number one complaints I hear from my clients is that they are spending so much time in meetings, and meetings are back to back, and meetings produce more work. Yet they're in meetings so often that they just don't have time to do all the work, right? So I think meetings can be super effective and productive. It's a chance to come together virtually or in person, collaborate, brainstorm, share information if they're done well. And so the title, we've got to stop meeting like this, means we've got to stop meeting in the ineffective way. We've got to stop meeting in the way that doesn't add value or help move things forward, where it's a waste of time, not a help.
Okay, so help me out. I'm like in this seat today, which is
Yeah.
like, and I've even gone and done the research. I don't know if you've seen this, Debbie, but I actually correlated because I have a meeting scheduler. I took the data out and charted the number of meetings I was having per month with the amount of
Mhm.
revenue that I have per month. And I was
Mhm.
surprised that there's a direct correlation for me,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
that the number of scheduled meetings that I have are is higher in the months that I have more revenue. And now, of course, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But I would love to hear, like, what are your distinctions between meetings that are useful and productive and make
Yeah.
good things happen
Yeah.
versus meetings that just waste time?
Yeah, I think meetings that have a clear objective that tie to an organization or an individual's values and that have a clear outcome with specific follow up. So when you see that your meetings are directly tied to months where you have higher revenue, my guess is those are probably pretty effective meetings. Either they're meetings with clients where you're billing for that time and you're adding value in those meetings. Possibly they're meetings with prospective clients or with your network that could lead to more work, or where you're gaining value or in a position to be of service and contributing value that feels fulfilling. So those are all things that, when we leave a meeting feeling that way, we're like, well, yeah, that was time well spent. Rather than some meetings, which I know people leave thinking, that was a waste of time. Like, what did anything change? Did anything move forward? What was that about? And it's unclear. So that's what I'm seeing.
Interesting too, because one of the meetings that I have recently, you know, I was a program manager at Microsoft, so making decisions, right, is like kind of
Mhm.
the key thing, right? We used to
Right.
make jokes, right? We're not going to write any code today. We're not going to build any code. We're going to build consensus, right? And
Yeah.
at Microsoft, that's a funny joke because quite often, sometimes a single person can write as much code faster or more than a committee can decide on even what to write.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and yeah, there are definitely some meetings where with multiple people, they take a long time to make a decision. My most frustrating personal meeting is meetings where people unmake decisions we spent a lot of time making,
Mm,
like last week. Like, why did we
happens. Yeah.
even bother?
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious when you've seen that happen, did that meeting have a clear objective? Like, did everybody in the room know what was meant to be accomplished during that meeting? And did it have an agenda and was the agenda followed?
In this particular one, there was an agenda, thank goodness. But this whole like scenario came out because somebody went off agenda, right?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
this meaning to go off the rails, the tangents. This was
Yep.
somebody, and it was like I said, it was something like there was a whole bunch of stuff that was built upon the decision that was made a week ago, and now you
Yeah.
kind of have to tear it all apart.
Yeah.
All right, and
Yeah.
and sometimes you don't even know. What I love to talk about is unintended consequences. When
Mm-hmm.
you change one thing, sometimes you don't know that you broke something here, here, and here.
Yeah. That ripple
So,
effect.
yeah, until you change it, and so it is. Again, it's very frustrating and it's very time wasting
Yeah.
for me as a team builder. And I'm just kind of
Right.
so. I think I heard some of your secrets, right? One of them is have an agenda.
Yes.
The second
Yes.
one is
I
follow
think
it,
yeah,
right?
and with virtual meetings, in particular, since that's your area of expertise and focus, I think these are even more important because you're not bringing people together in a room. There maybe isn't that passing in the hallway that happens. So yes, I think ensuring that everybody understands why they were invited, so having a clear objective, each person coming into that meeting understands why they're there. So they've bought into, yep, this I'm needed there, or I'm going to get value out of it, and this will be an important use of my time. So there's value for me, or I have value to give, and then having an agenda and sticking with it. It doesn't mean that we have to be so structured that if we have, from 3:30 to 3:40, we're going to talk about this, and we need 2 more minutes to wrap up a conversation. Of course, we can have some flexibility and some flow because that feels best. But if we get on a topic that's not on the agenda, we have to quickly decide, one, is this a valid topic? Often it can be, and that's where we can use a strategy like a parking lot, right? And you can do that in virtual meetings, you can do that in person meetings, and you can validate for the person that brought that up. That would be good to talk about. We don't have that on the agenda today, so I want to make sure to add it to a future meeting. Put it on the parking lot. That person feels validated, and you can move on, right? So that's agenda is a big one in my opinion. It helps everybody be on the same page. And then just making sure that people understand at the conclusion of a meeting what has been decided, right? Are we leaving the virtual room on the same page? Have we heard different things? So just summarizing key decisions and distributing those to anyone that wasn't there that needs to know those, and then talking about next steps. Those are important things as well. And then who's going to own those, who's going to be accountable by when, all things to make sure that that time in meeting was well spent.
Yeah, in our team building, our favorite phrase that we teach people now is, so what I think I heard you say is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So like as you get towards that closer to the end of the meeting,
mm-hmm.
come back and see if you can recount. And again, you're dealing now with virtual, which is there's lots of distractions or lots of other
Correct.
things. It is possible, right, that you didn't pay attention to the whole thing. So
Yeah.
you can come back in there and say, well, again, what I think I heard you say was this, 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 and
Yes.
this.
Yes.
Um, and you can be wrong, but at least you're going to pick it out
Right.
at that
Right.
point. And I think that's really why that last piece is so important. Now, let me go to this word too. You picked this word, which is a pretty unique word, which is obsession. So I'd love
Yeah.
to hear like, what do you think people are obsessed with that they shouldn't be, and what would you rather people be obsessed with that would be positive for their virtual meetings?
Well, I think the obsession of, can we fix this problem of too many ineffective meetings? Because boy, if we could, I've got people all the time saying, I need more time to like fill in the blank, right? Well, if one of the things that we could do is cut down on meetings that aren't effective, or make sure that meetings that we do have end in better outcomes, we could get a lot more done in less time, right? And then end up with more time. So to me, it's kind of an obsession. I always look for ways to save people time and to help them get results with less time, if that's possible, because we all have things that we'd love to do with extra time. You think, even if it's coming up with just a little slot to take a nap or whatever it is. So that's why it's an obsession for me, because I'm a productivity consultant and coach, and this is something I hear repeatedly is these meetings. I think, was it Patrick Lencioni wrote a Death by Meetings book. Have to look at who the author was, but it was one of the bigger gurus.
Yeah.
And we certainly don't want that. We don't want death by meetings.
Uh, Yeah, what I did for my own personal schedule is that I do use a scheduler, which, some people didn't like, but I thought it was actually probably one of my top 10 productivity tools in the last 2 years. I send you a link, and in fact, it's in every single one of my emails. You want to meet with me, you got to click that link and find a time that works best for you. And I phrase it that way. So I have a friend who had a particular, she didn't like it, right? She didn't like the tool, like I like the human aspect to it. And I said,
Mhm.
okay, that's fine. So let me see if I can frame it like this. Find your best time to meet with me.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not
that's
mine, it's
yeah,
yours.
that's right.
And so,
Anytime you're asking someone to do something or make a change, when they understand what's in it for them, they're more likely to do that.
so what I did with it too is I did open the whole thing up, which would be the default. And then I found, I feel very blessed is that I had, like, I once had a 16 meeting day, right? Number one, that's not what you should do. And number two is that um, I didn't have any time then to do the work. And so I looked at the other way, which is now if you are not my client and we're just meeting, I schedule all those for my morning. That's kind of
Mhm.
like 9 to 12.
Yep.
I get 6 slots every day, and again, for those of you who want to meet me, you can click the link and do it, and you can see it for yourself. And then what I did was open up the afternoon,
Mhm.
and now I gave a link that only my clients have. So I
Right.
would So, because this actually had to solve two problems. I went the other way. So I swung one way, Debbie, which is like open,
Mhm.
wide open. The other way was
Right,
like now only in the morning. But my clients say I need more flexibility, right? Because otherwise I can't meet with you for 3 weeks. I was like,
right,
that's not right. So I said, okay, here's a link only for you. If you're a
right.
client now, you can access my afternoon, but my
Yep.
non-paid client. And I found that that balance for me as a entrepreneur worked really, really well. And now I safeguard for the most part. I'm almost okay. 12 to 1, I take a real lunch
Mhm, mhm.
because there's
Yeah,
nothing
I think,
worse than working, 16 meetings in a row on a virtual, and you can't go to the restroom and you're not taking care of yourself. That also is not the right answer.
right. There's other things you can do with a scheduling tool where you can put a barrier of prep time or follow-up time padding, if you will, before or after a meeting. I went to when someone schedules with me, and I use a scheduler as well. It is like a 45 minute. If it's a client session, it's a 45 minute session instead of what I used to do an hour. And the reason that I do that is both to give myself that 15 minutes in between a biological break, a time to, dump notes into the tool that I use for that, and or look at the notes for the upcoming, right? So even if I have back to back, they're not truly back to back. So a little bit of buffer time is helpful. And with virtual meetings, because I think when I worked in corporate America and I had one meeting here and then I'd walk down the hall or go up an elevator or whatever. You got up, you walked around, you passed a bathroom, right? Now
Yeah.
the temptation to sit in the seat and go back to back is certainly there, but we need to get up and move and take breaks. So building those into the day can also be really helpful.
Yeah, doctors and medical really pioneered this, which is like if you ever see a doctor's meeting is 50 minutes,
Yep,
right? Because they take those
yep,
10 minutes to chart and break and do all that
that's
other
right.
stuff. And so why
That's
can't
right.
you? And technologically, you can do it now, which is like you can just push a button, say what that buffer is, and
Right,
have it.
right.
I've actually still resisted it, and the reason why is because when I get into a deep conversation, I'm like a connector, right? I'm like
Uh-huh.
networking. I'm an extrovert. I'm a
Yeah.
networker, and so if I get in the deep conversation, I'll go, and that I'll manage my breaks, some other way. So that's just me
Uh-huh.
personally,
Yeah.
how I've been able to do it. Because the other thing that virtual does, which is like it's much easier, it's much less social capital you lose when you forget a meeting. Now, I don't like forgetting a meeting, but it has happened. But it
Mm-hmm.
happens to me. Like I still get about 10% of my virtual meetings, despite 50,000 reminders and a personal reminder in the moment is like saying, I'm on now, come and get it. Sometimes people get their schedule wrong, time zones,
Right.
whatever, they're in a different place. And that's when I take a break. I actually sometimes really happy
Uh,
when someone bails on me.
yeah, I mean, a cancellation or a no-show, well, they definitely happen. You can see that as a gift of time. It was time you didn't expect to have. So yes, you can take breaks. I was gonna say one other thing with the scheduler. Often when I have spoken to somebody and or I'm going to send them the scheduling link with the suggestion that they pick a time that works well for their schedule on my calendar, I will sometimes include, I shouldn't say sometimes, I often say, if you have difficulty finding a time that works for you, would you please let me know? Because I have some good boundaries set around when I will have certain types of meetings too, but they're not completely inflexible. So if your example of you've opened up your afternoons to clients, if you had a client that said, John, I can never meet in the afternoon, or let's say that, I mean, I have clients that are international, right? So if time zone wise, it just doesn't work and I'm able to, adjust accordingly, then I will do that.
Oh, I love those solutions around that. So now that we're, pandemic too, let me just check.
Mhm.
Debbie, were you remote working prior to 2020, or was it all new for you?
It was not all new. I did do some remote work, most of it the consulting and coaching. I was still, and sometimes training remotely where a company or organization might want to save on the travel expense. So I was familiar with remote tools and delivering service in that way, but I certainly went to doing that 100% of the time come about March 2020.
All right. So for you,
Yeah.
what has to happen for you for a virtual meeting to be engaging for you? In this case, I'll say as an attendee.
as an attendee. Um, Back to I need to understand why I'm there. So I need to buy into that this is going to be a good use of my time. I'm pretty protective of how I spend my time, in part because I try to model that for others, but I need to buy into the value. So I need to have a clear understanding of, why I'm there and what the purpose is. I do like when there's an agenda, just because that, I'm a J, an extreme J on the Myers-Briggs. Yep, I do like structure, not inflexible, but I do like to know what's coming. That to me brings stress level down, brings anxiety down. So for me, that's something that I like. And virtually, I like it when the meeting leader or facilitator finds ways to help me, but anybody, feel connected and engaged. So connected to the content or connected to other participants. Connection is a value of mine, and that's important to me, and I just find it more interesting. I've always been in the people profession of some kind. I came from a human resources background, so that's important. And yeah, engaging when I feel like the time is well spent.
So give me maybe if you could an example. So it could be either a speaker or session that you had, or more importantly, a tip or technique. So you said find ways to feel connected to content and other participants. I'm curious, like,
Mhm.
what have you seen that you're like, oh, I really like that. That was awesome. That was a
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
I'm gonna do that
yeah.
too.
I personally like when there's, both the combination of someone on camera, potentially slides or visuals that are other than the speaker, um, a chat, and deciding whether that's a distraction or whether it's a way to engage. I find it a way to engage in a simple way when there's a question asked and I can see others' input. So maybe there's not time for everybody to say out loud what their response to a question is, but it's interesting to see the input. Those are ways that I feel connected. Of course, breakout rooms, if it's a larger event or meeting, those breakout rooms, are definitely a help in connecting with a smaller group and maybe having a higher level of participation than is possible in the larger group.
Do you have a shout out for a speaker or a host or facilitator who's just like, I really love how you run your meetings?
Well, that's a great question.
You're all the
Oh,
way.
I'm drawing a blank, but I know that there are many where I think that was engaging. I'm gonna have to come back to that.
Okay, good. When you come back to that, write it in the chat if you
Okay,
remember a key meeting like that.
okay.
And yeah, what do you think is your top meeting in the past 2 years? Whether it's your meeting or somebody else's meeting. I'd love to hear like what's top virtual meeting in the last 2 years.
Yeah. Um, I think as far as one that I've led, I would definitely say a virtual training. I'm thinking of an organization in particular where it was just a nice size, definitely manageable from a. So I think there's a difference between presenting and training, and the challenge with doing either virtually training, where you want to impact change, transfer skills, allow someone to walk away being able to do something or know something rather than presenting. So I'm thinking about a virtual training that I did pretty recently for an organization where there were about 20 participants. It was a nice size. We were able to have some conversation. People were really respectful of both muting, but also coming off mute and engaging. And it just felt like it flowed well. And I don't know, if that just was the right mix of people. We did have an agenda. I was able to, cover the content that I hoped to in the time allotted, but also have some time for conversation. So it just felt good. And I got good feedback. So I'd say that was a win.
Oh yeah, that's always a win. Have you ever read what is it? The Russians' book called Flow.
I have not.
Oh my goodness. Let me see if I can get his name because
Okay.
see Flow book. It's a tough name. Uh, Mihaly Six centimale. Oh, I'm just gonna crush this title.
I was going to say, I might have to have you copy and paste that into the chat.
I will put this in the chat though. Let me
Yeah.
do this. Yeah, the psychology of optimal experience. So this
Okay.
gentleman actually put monitors on people
Hmm.
and had them say, "When am I having a like a level 10 flow experience?"
Hmm. Hmm.
Right. And so what I've actually said about training and about events, there's a there's the training that goes slow. That's like go back to your school days
Right.
when the clock couldn't go fast enough. It just felt
Yep.
like, tick, right?
Yeah.
Take it too slow. Okay.
Yeah.
Then there's the ones that went too fast,
Yep.
right? Which is like it went through in a blur and you actually wish it was slower. And then
Yes.
there's events which I say they go slow and fast at the same time as the
Hmm.
personal experience. And what I mean by that is that you go by and the time went quickly.
Yep.
And if you go back and think about it, you covered everything. You covered a lot in that
Hmm.
time.
Yeah.
And so really the key here is that flow. So
Hmm.
I love that you said that because one is that you show that a virtual meeting can have flow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah. Yeah.
we already know an in-person meeting can have flow, but I think
Right.
some people thought that it was impossible to have a virtual meeting in flow.
I don't think so. And when I've talked about flow from a productivity standpoint, it's this desired state where there's focus and the creativity, the innovation, the sense of accomplishment, the progression that feels almost effortless. Like it's happening
Yeah.
and you're in that state, and time can pass pretty quickly, but it's good stuff, right? Cal Newport wrote a book called Deep Work. I don't know if you're familiar with that. um, and he talks about the state of flow that happens when you do focus and go deeper in something. And in order to have that happen, we need to think about how can we eliminate distraction, minimize interruption. And I think that's true with virtual meetings as well. There's a lot of people that I see, I mean, even just back to in person too, with their PowerPoint slides, they're bringing in, wingdings and all these things, and like overdoing it on the animation. And each slide is drastically different, and it's almost overstimulation for some people, right? And others, they do that in order to create variety and visual interest. So I think there's a balance to be had. And I think when we talk about flow in virtual meetings, we've got to pay attention to those kinds of things. So enough variety so that we don't have people that are falling asleep or feeling totally disengaged, but also enough focus to accomplish what we set out to do.
Yeah, I'm putting into the chat here, Haley said, those who are on Facebook, um, a link to my good friend Rick Altman is hosting. It's happening, I think, 3 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now, betterpresenting.com/summit. And one of their core principles around animation is your viewers' eyes will always follow the animation. Right. So
Mhm.
even the fact, like, I asked Debbie too, because I don't use this background with some people because my ADHD friends will tell me, they go like, I just want to get a net and catch one of the butterflies. Right? They can't see it. They can't hear anything I do. They can't see anything I do because I've
Yep.
got butterflies going around in my background. So I
Yep.
don't use it
Yep.
that often. I would also probably slow them down. And that's what Rick has taught me around that. They showed this thing where a rocket comes through, and it's like he can get a whole audience, right,
Yeah.
to turn their head like it's a tennis match
Yes.
of
Yes.
animation. And so
Yeah.
great presentations too also are well designed.
Right.
Right, part of productivity is saying not to use every feature, but when can I use the right feature to do the right
Yes.
effect for my
Yes.
right purpose.
Yes. So intention, I think is
Oh,
is
good
key
one.
there. Yeah.
What's some of your intentions that you've had for your virtual meetings? I'm curious now.
My intentions.
Yeah, yours.
Yeah. I mean, I think a top intention for me is always that every single participant walk away with at least one gem, right?
Right.
So I have an intention to have impact. I have an intention to make a difference. And my style is to offer what I think are pretty simple, easy to implement strategies and techniques. So that's my intention, is that people walk away feeling empowered and like, hey, I can do that. I'm going to try that when we get off, or I'm going to try that tomorrow. That's my top intention for most of my workshops, but also the consulting and coaching I do, is that somebody walk away feeling like they got value.
Yeah, and that I feel the same way too, which is like I got the ultimate compliment once. Somebody she came back and she emailed me. She goes, "Oh, John, by the way, I'm selling all my office furniture, and it's your fault." And then she left the email like that. I'm like, "Oh, okay. What did I do?" And she goes, "No, that was a compliment." She goes, you inspired me." Right here, I'll give the view of my setup for half a second. You inspired me to get a lift desk, right? One that's got a push button, like so you can stand up, right, when you
Mhm,
present.
mhm.
And she goes, yeah, you inspired me to do that. So, if like, I was surprised. I give this talk all the time and I have six things. And the seventh thing that I taught at the very beginning was how to stand up.
Uh-huh.
Quite often, like 50+% of the audience will come back and going, I totally forgot.
Oh,
I totally forgot that I should stand up while I present. Because, well, we're virtual. We spend most of our time sitting
yeah,
down.
yeah,
Um, but when you're presenting, especially to a larger group or
yes,
or on the
yes,
training side, you will gain huge advantages for standing up, and most people have forgotten that.
yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah,
that,
I think that's, holding your energy,
mm,
because when you're presenting or leading or training virtually, you've got to have a different energy than you might even in an in-person room, because it has to transcend the screen, right? And I agree, standing up can definitely do that.
yeah. So now that you've seen 2 years of virtual land, and we're heading into
Hmm.
year three, what does Debbie Rosemont either see in the future or wish for in the
Yeah.
future as far as virtual meetings go?
I think we're going to continue to have a lot of hybrid meetings and events, where some people are together in a room and others are virtually attending or participating. I think that's another challenge to facilitators and trainers and consultants, in that then not only do you need to focus on engaging people virtually, but you're now also paying attention to people in a room and kind of, the back and forth a little bit. I did that recently. I had a training for a group at Microsoft, and half of the people were in the room and the other half were behind a very large screen. And, of course, they weren't actually behind the screen, but they were at their own space and participating remotely. And I continued to look up at the screen where the virtual participants were. That's not where the camera was. So when I did that, I was actually less engaged with them. Although I could have eye contact, I needed to remember I needed to look where the camera was so that they felt that connection. So that was an extra challenge. And I think that we're going to see more of that, with some people participating virtually and some in person. And so finding ways to make that situation work well for everybody, I think, is our next big challenge.
It is a big challenge too, because exactly what you said, which is you went to go and engage with the group, and
Mhm.
it was perceived not engaging by them because of the camera angle. So
Yeah.
there's things that I've done in my recent setups, which is often I'm trying to figure out how do you connect with the audience and
Mhm.
virtual at the same time.
Right.
And one of the ways that you might need to do that I've done it recently, is, well, one is you still need the camera around here. So I'm trying to think like I'm in person but presenting hybrid. Some of the
Right.
things that I do is I will actually cover myself up in a way, which is I'll have
Mhm.
to hide behind my laptop so I have the camera so I can see that
Right.
gallery.
Yep.
And I spotlight myself, and what we do for the in-person audience is give them a projector screen, which is the same as what the virtual audience is, which is
Yeah.
my video, like
Okay.
really full size.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And and so you have to think about what do you want each audience to look at, and can it
Right.
be close to the same?
Right. And that's another thing, is that, sometimes when you have some people in person and some virtual, is it those that are virtual feel forgotten, or like the stepchild, where, all right, you're really talking to the people in the room, and we're this afterthought. So yes, if there's a way to get everybody on the same playing field, yet I mean, there is an advantage to being in person. And so, for those that are in the room, is it an easier connection? And because they're there in person, do they prefer the in-person eye contact versus they're at a screen? Because if they're looking at a screen, well, then they could be anywhere, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. So I do know that I recently did mix that up, which is
Mhm.
different times I would, again, I try to actually put the camera in a way so that I can actually look over the laptop, like in this
Yeah.
case,
Yeah.
right? And I do make eye contact with some people,
Right.
right? And then again, there's times when I'm core presenting like this.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
there's the other part too, which is a lot of people forget the room camera,
Uh-huh.
which is if you have a room camera or if you even have a secondary device, it could be a phone, an iPad, whatever.
Right.
Don't connect the audio because you get echo, but you want
Yep.
the camera and you want the camera to go into the room. So if I go into the audience, I
Mhm.
then spotlight or I show the camera from the room camera so they can see that I'm interacting with somebody in the room.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
So the virtual person can understand what's going on. And I actually spend as much as possible equal time asking questions to the in-person group as well as the virtual group.
Yeah, I tried to be conscious of that, and that's where I see things going. Is I think we're going to have more of that. I really do. Yeah.
I was such a fan of like movies like Max Headroom growing up, where these avatars type of things were around, and now it's like reality.
Yeah.
And so you got to think about like what is the best view. I just had to facilitate this meeting, a very hardcore meeting between U.S. and Taiwan. Everyone who was in Taiwan was in the same room. Everyone who
Okay.
was in the U.S. though were in their own houses on separate computers, and so
Yes.
I equalized the playing field by having everyone who was in Taiwan who was virtual just turn on their laptop and turn on their camera to them
Right.
without audio,
Right.
so
Yep.
that the gallery view was still the same, but it also had the room camera, and
Right.
so you could get the best of both worlds, kind of,
Yes.
sorta, which
Yes.
is seeing your person in person as well
Right.
as now seeing
Right.
everybody who's on this meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, I had another organization that I did. It was actually a half day training for. So that's, to hold attention virtually for half a day, but they were in person. So this was an organization in Boston, and they chose to do this virtually to save. I mean, they saved quite a bit of money to not have to fly me out and put me up in a hotel and that sort of thing. But they were in person, I was virtual. So that was another dynamic that when you talk about command of the room,
Yep.
or really engaging people, they could all see each other. I didn't have any power over the setup
Yep.
and the technology. So did the best I could. And again, felt like it went well, but these are all things we have to consider: the setup and how to make the most of it.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Debbie. What's the one thing that you want people to remember if they could only remember one thing from this interview? What's the one thing you want that to have it stick for them?
Yeah. I'm going to go back to our title of we've got to stop meeting like this. Meetings can be productive. And since we're talking really about virtual meetings, when you're going to be either a leader of or a participant of a virtual meeting, either communicate or understand or ask for what is the purpose of the meeting, what's the objective we're going after, and then you can help make sure that the train goes in the right direction and that you end up with an outcome that's productive.
I love it. What do you want? Ask the questions. What do you want? And like the agenda? How are we getting there?
Yeah.
Answer those two before you meet. That's what one of my very good friends who had the early research on Zoom fatigue said. It's the problem's not virtual meetings. The problems were in-person meetings, and they just get worse and magnified by virtual.
And I think that's what I'm saying is these tips, some of the tips we've talked about, apply across the board.
Yeah. Excellent. Where can people find you, Debbie?
Website is www.itssimplyplace.com. You can book a call with me using the link right there at a time that works well for your schedule. But that's a great place. And then on most social media platforms, if you type in Simply Place, I'm going to pop up there too. And I love to engage in that way as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Debbie. Appreciate your time, all the awesome tips, especially around a hybrid. Again, I still think most people, including myself, haven't figured out the right way. But I can certainly say that I found the best, and I've certainly have experienced the worst ways. It'll be curious to see where we are in a few years from now.
Yeah, well, we'll keep learning. We'll keep getting better. I'm sure of it because it's not going to go away.
Thank you, Debbie.
Yeah, thanks, John.
All right, this is John Chen. This has been another Engaging Virtual Meetings interviews with our good friend Debbie Rosemont, productivity consultant, trainer, coach in this area. Make sure and click her link. Great tips. I know she'll meet with you if you just have a challenge around. They're looking for this. If you're looking for more productivity tips here on virtual. Speaking of which, we talked about a hybrid a lot, which I am super excited about. I'm going to give a presentation I have never done before, which is I'm going to share the best secrets from all of the hybrids I produced in the last 2 years at my conference, the Engaging Virtual Meeting Conference, October 18th through the 22nd this year. By the way, every October, every year, there are free tickets and there are VIP tickets. We hope to see you there. If you've got a hybrid coming up, you've got to see this so that you can learn from the mistakes and look for the best practices inside of your hybrid. We hope to see you here online. If you want to be interviewed, just click the button and you can actually connect with me, click interview. And I'd just love to introduce people here who are in our Engaging Virtual Meetings community and introduce you to the rest of the people that are here. So we'll look forward to seeing you. Our conference is coming up October 18th. I look forward to seeing you there or somewhere sooner. We'll see you next time.
Don't we start people